What is skill-based matchmaking? God help you if you can't find out at least something from just the name alone, but the general idea is that a developer takes an arbitrary element of their game and assigns a certain value to that, in which they determine whether or not a player is skillful or not. This could be anything from what they consider to be a win, or the actual like KD of a player, let's say in Call of Duty. A good example of this would be Dead by Daylight, which uses kills from the killer to determine whether a game is a win or a loss in order to move their skill-based matchmaking appropriately, and then match them up with people of equal skill based on their system. Now I imagine there's probably like two different kinds of people watching this video. They either think it's really good or terrible. If you're more casual, you probably think it's really good. If you're hardcore, then you probably think it's, you know, the worst thing ever, basically Satan. I think it's really important to think about, like, what does skill-based matchmaking do when it's working optimally? And what that really leads to is what you would hope to be a perfectly balanced game, which in reality probably just leads to monotony. It's going to be really boring, you're not really going to have fun with yourself. What's the point, right? Every game's going to be the same, you're always going to have to try, there's no ease, there's no relax. Like, in older games, you would often have moments where you have an easier game, then you have a harder game, and it kind of gives you a chance to take a break. With perfect skill-based matchmaking, you're going to have the same experience almost every time. It's always going to be somewhat challenging, and some people might like this. Some people might really want to have a really balanced game every single match, and I don't really see a problem with that, but I imagine for a more casual person, it's going to be kind of boring. Every game's going to feel the same, you're not really going to have a lot of variety, but at the end of the day, I mean, skill-based matchmaking is never going to be perfect. I've seen a couple of these examples where it's abused for the sake of better players playing against worse players. If we go back to like DBD, for example, people can lower their skill-based matchmaking relatively easily by just, you know, not winning their games, right? They could just stay still the whole game, let the people get out, they lose the game, lower their skill-based matchmaking, and then maybe after once or twice doing that, they can play against worse players, basically ruining the whole system. These players now are going to play against a harder killer, even though realistically they should be playing against people that are of the same skill level as them. The systems are kind of easy to abuse, I feel like, in a lot of cases, unless they're properly crafted, which I don't think most game companies really care to do that. Now, on the flip side, there's also the fact that people are going to try harder because they realize, oh, there's some value into me winning this game. It's not just a number anymore. It's not just, oh, I have a new win, or I have to care about my own stats. It's also, oh, my skill-based matchmaking goes up when I win. So it encourages people to play, you know, more meta builds, harder, and overall is going to lead, again, to less variety in the game, more monotony, less interesting games. Overall, I mean, it's just going to lead to a worse experience because people are going to be trying harder and harder and harder because they realize there's value to them winning more so than just their own stats. Now, I really don't want to think like, oh, it's all bad. Like, no, I mean, there are elements that are good about skill-based matchmaking. Like, the idea of fair games, like, on paper sounds really good, if they can truly be fair. You know, like, worse players are not going to be matched up against, you know, the best of the best as often. But, like I said, that can still be abused. Either way, like, there are elements that are good to it. Like, I'm not going to say it's all negatives, but the idea of, like, implementing skill-based matchmaking in every game nowadays, I think is just bogging down a lot of communities and making people want to try harder in these games, which, you know, might seem okay, but at the end of the day, I mean, a casual guy coming home after their job, you know, they worked like 8-9 hours, isn't really going to have a fun time when, like, everybody's trying their ass off trying to beat this guy just because of some arbitrary, you know, point system that they can't even see half the time, which is increasing their skill-based matchmaking, which at the end of the day really doesn't matter. I think overall, like, what I'm trying to get across in this video is the skill-based matchmaking is really arbitrary. There's a lot of imbalance to it. Developers, I think, often tend to think that, like, a win condition is a very, like, stagnant thing. It's a very easy thing to pick on. If we look at Dead by Daylight again, like, is kills really like an appropriate way to determine whether or not someone wins? I don't know, because there's also hook states. So what does skill really count as? Someone could be better, but they just use more meta strategies, which overall I think is unhealthy for the game. So overall I think skill-based matchmaking has its upsides, but because the practice is so arbitrary, it just leads to a worse game experience. If I look at past games, I feel as though it's not very fun to, constantly have the same experience, constantly have the same meta builds, just to win a game that, at the end of the day, doesn't really matter. No. I think in the past it was you would see a lot more variety. I think people just cared less about winning. I think it was more about having fun rather than what do I need to do to beat my fellow player and increase my skill-based matchmaking, or appeal to some audience because I have a higher skill-based matchmaking. At the end of the day, I think it's basically the same thing as like old grade systems that they use in a lot of different games. It's just something that can't be seen, and it's like I know why my experience is getting worse, but I have no way to opt out of it by playing casual play or anything like that. Basically, it's just like playing ranked all the time. Now, I mean, at the end of the day, you're free to make your own assumptions and your own, conclusions, but to me, I feel like skill-based matchmaking is pretty negative overall to the gaming scene. I hope maybe developers take a little more care in skill-based matchmaking, and, maybe they can improve it at some point. But as it is right now, I don't really see it as a good thing in most games. Thanks for watching.